Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, folks. A lot of us down here on the continent of Puerto Rico are very happy and grateful that Ernesto passed us by. So prayers up for that and for the people that might be in the way of this monster. But you know what didn't miss us? Unusual option activity, or UOA. And we've got it for you in spades, folks. So stay tuned. Bang!
Yeah, baby. Midweek, Wednesday, Hump Day.
Hump Day. That's one of my favorite commercials, Pete, with the camel. Hump
Awesome.
Day. And we are actually very grateful, folks, that this storm, which had been brewing for about a week, made its move to and towards Puerto Rico last night, late, like 11 o'clock. But by 1 o'clock, it had spun north a little further, so it gave us a glancing blow. We got like 40 mile an hour, 45 mile an hour winds, some scattered heavy rain, but not nearly the 10 inches and flash flooding and all that kind of stuff that we might have got. So again, prayers up for all of us here and for anybody in the way of this, because it's heading up towards the Bahamas and Bermuda, and to Pete's pal in the Turks and Caicos, Pete.
Yeah.
So with the Grand Cayman and Turks and Caicos, again, we hope that this one passes you guys by as well, Raul Paul.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Pete, let's talk about Macro Minute. Macro Minute, I'm going to say annual basis core CPI increased by 3.2%. Now, most of you know that we're trying to keep inflation, this is consumer prices, folks, which is the inflation that the Fed cares about a lot. We're trying to make sure it gets down to 2. It's still increasing by 3.2, but it is the lowest level since April 2021, Pete.
So I think a lot of people are embracing that, John, and reading through that to mean something into the future, which is likely. I think the one thing that really does stand out, and you talked about CPI, how about the fact about September and what it's starting to look like now as far as the cuts? There's a 58% that we're going to do a quarter point. There's also a 41% that we could cut at 50. So either way, people are definitely on board saying, you know what, we're going to cut rates. It's just a matter of, is it a quarter or a 50? And it's going to be interesting. Obviously, quarter was what everybody was looking at. That has now shifted just a little bit more and a little bit more. And a lot of people talking about that 50 cent. We'll see. It'll be not too far away. We're only probably, is it about a month before we get to that September meeting?
Yeah, well, and I think in all likelihood, Pete, the Fed dodged a bullet because they were calling for an emergency cut last week, which was, in Pete's opinion, my opinion, absolutely not necessary. Obviously, in the opinion of the FOMC, it was not necessary. And I think unless we experience a couple more pops of serious volatility, and I don't mean 20, I mean 35, 40 or higher, unless we get that, Pete, I think the Fed will not make a, between meeting move, an emergency, if you will. But I do think that the likelihood of a 50 will keep moving up. Doesn't mean we'll get it, but right now it has been moving up, to your point, Pete. All right, take a look at this energy, because the reason I put this energy graph up here, folks, is that residential electricity by state, the idiot Gavin Newsom, who is a complete fool. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. You could be a Democrat, and more power to you, folks. But if the governor of your state, California, is saying that energy is cheaper in California, it is not cheaper anywhere in California. This is basically showing you that California energy per kilowatt hour is more than double Florida. And he was bragging, Pete, saying, oh, energy in California is cheaper. No, it's not. And if you run a business in California, that's a big drag on you. If you're a consumer, that's one more place where you're paying more, not less. You're not paying less than Florida. You're not paying less than Texas. Those are two of the top 20 cheapest electricity rates. And if you want to talk about nat gas, which is what I'm focused on today, Pete, nat gas is moving up strong. It was up 5% nat gas futures this morning. So I thought that kind of merited a fantastic futures, Pete.
I'm going to jump right back on the VIX, John, because we did hear from so many people that really follow it. No, they don't. And they talk about it a lot. No, they don't. But anyway, when you look at the VIX and you go back 9 days ago and it was trading 65 in the pre-market, and then all of a sudden you just see this cascading down, that's kind of what you should expect. All you got to do is go back, take a look at the charts, and you see spike, and not very long after, it pulls all the way back, and sometimes even pulls back even further. A great example of that is today, John. Do you know where that VIX is right this moment? 1650. Now, this is the same VIX that we were talking about at 30s and 35s most of last week. Started to dip down into the 20s, broke under 20. Yesterday, 19s, let's call it. Today, it was starting in the 17s. Here we are at 1650. So it does show you a lot. I will point out one thing, however. On August 7th, 50 cent was added again, so we need to be careful. The volatility index was trading about 2230. I bought 95,000 of the October 16th expiring, the 50 strike calls, 5-0. So this is another one where it's very interesting to see that type of a trade. Doesn't mean he's going to be right. He's right pretty frequently, but it doesn't mean he's going to be right, or she. But the reality is there. The volatility index still has a little bit of a potential activity into the future. And that we're talking about is all the way out to October. So it's a long ways from where we are right now.
Certainly is. But 50 cent, the timing isn't always like that.
Right.
But if that trader, man or woman, is actually rolling down and getting into position to protect or bet on a market swoon and or a volatility spike, because they kind of go hand in glove, that's something that we should all pay attention to, because this last trade, Pete, they only made between 70 and $100 million.
Is that
on
all?
that. That's a real trade. All right, let's talk about Cardinal Health. CAH, strong Q4 results. Earnings per share, $1.84, better than the $1.73 that people were looking for. Revenue increased 12% year over year to almost $60 billion. So a lot of us would say that's pretty darn good. Certainly the stock market is rewarding them, Pete. It opened about 6%, 7% higher. It's holding on to almost 5% of that gain. And this is not a cheap stock. I mean, this is a $26 billion behemoth in the healthcare space. So the fact that they're holding on to a gain like this, I think very interesting, Pete.
Very interesting. And to your point, John, they crushed it on the earnings. They crushed it on the revenue. The specialty pharma was a monster for them, a huge catalyst for the big beats that they made. They raised their full year 25. Their guidance was very strong for earnings. Their share repurchase was added to, and now it's $750 million. I mean, is there anything that you look at here where you'd say, you know what, that's a little bit sketchy? No, is the answer. This was an absolutely beautiful report. You and I have talked about a few of these now in this earnings season where it's like, hey, I've dug into it, can't find anything negative at all. And this is what it should be doing. It's not too far off the 52-week highs, 116, not that far away. But as you point out, it was up a little higher, now up about 5%, holding on to some pretty decent gains. But this is a stock that has performed pretty nicely so far already.
Yes, it certainly has. All right, let's take a look, Pete, at Kellanova. And before we really dive into it, let's take a look at what Pete and Mark Lopresti were talking about on August 5th. Keep in mind, this is August 14th. This wasn't that long ago, folks. Okay, Jared, let's roll it.
Well, there's a company out there by the name of Mars, who Mars is attacking. If you see this below here, Mars is attacking. How are they attacking? Well, they've decided that they want to maybe potentially at least have a buyout here, an acquisition here. This could be a monstrous trade because of the fact they are one of the largest privately owned companies in the world. And we're talking about a $27 billion food industry acquisition. I would say that's a pretty nice size. And matter of fact, they're right at 52-week highs. Stock range is 47 to 75. They're looking at 75 plus, and a full day of average trading that was already eclipsed in the first hour of trade. Gives you a little bit of an idea of how crazy this thing is. Matter of fact, they didn't just eclipse it, 3 times normal volume within the first hour. So gives you an idea that people are buying into this. They think this is probably going to happen. I say it like that because they don't always have to happen, Mark, just because there's a bid out there. But the likelihood would probably be very high.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that this speaks to really briefly, Pete, is on the value of those tried and true and evergreen consumer brands that people tend to turn to, that people tend to trust when they need to make harder decisions in times when their dollars are stretched. And we're going to talk about that on the show, of course. So I think good timing for this transaction.
Yep, that's the way they roll, Pete. And boy, take a look at this one, folks. They bought tons of calls. So how would you like to have 500,000 shares, folks, at about $74 a share? Because that's, as you can see on the screen, where the stock was, just under 74 bucks a share. Today it trades up to 80 and 45 cents. What's the right to buy it at 75 worth? At 80? Well, it's worth at least $5, and you paid $1.90 for it. I'd say that is pretty unusual activity that paid off bigly.
They paid off bigly is right, John. I mean, that's a monstrous move. It's a huge bunch of options that were put into play that were fantastic. 52-week highs, over 80 bucks. So everything you can mention about this one is also amazing. And by the way, we were kicking around a $27 billion number. This is probably north of 30 billion, John. And by the way, Mars, being as big as they are, they're going to be financing it with cash. This is going to get done, it looks like, in a hurry. It's going to be pretty impressive. Somewhere in the first half of 2025 should be pretty interesting. The actual number that they put out there, 83.50. So there might still be a little bit of room. I wouldn't want to be a pig here, but there might even be a little bit more room to the upside. Now, for how long? I don't know, but this one's pretty interesting, and that unusual option activity was phenomenal.
It certainly was. And all of you who had some of those calls, bang. Make sure you spend it wisely. But that was a nice pop.
Yeah.
Whenever you get more than double your money on an investment, yes. All right, let's take a look, folks, at the parent company of Victoria's Secret. It's VSCO. Now, I'm sure Jared was tempted to put one of the Victoria's Secret supermodels on the screen.
Tempted.
But Pete had to talk him down. I would have encouraged it, but Pete had to talk him down.
Yeah.
But take a look at this, folks. We had unusual activity in Victoria's Secret. And yes, I just love saying that, unusual activity in Victoria's Secret. But 300,000 share equivalent, that's the 2,900 AUG15 calls. So what's the right to buy it at 15 worth when the stock trades to 23 today, Pete? $8 is the answer. And if you paid $2 for something that is now worth $8, that's what we're talking about in Victoria's Secret. An explosion to the upside and fantastic. And by the way, Pete, this is the CEO that they announced was the head of intimates at Savage Fenty. That happens to be Rihanna's company. She was also global CEO for Anthropologie and Urban Outfitters. So that's the real optimism about picking Hillary Super as your new CEO.
We're seeing a lot of changes at CEO. We saw it yesterday when we were looking at what was going on with Starbucks, right, John? I mean, that stock popped up 21%. Chipotle dropped down about 10% or whatever it was, based upon what was going on with that move to grab that CEO and bring it over to Starbucks. Hillary Super. Is there a better name? I mean, it's like a linebacker. There was a guy at Notre Dame years ago named Stonebreaker. Well, this one's Hillary Super because she is super and she's done everything that you were just talking about, John. There's a large short interest here. The PE is extremely low. I think this is a company that if they can get themselves put together, start putting together more profits, could start to run and move pretty quickly. I think they hired the right person. That's always a key element. They're still going to have the former CEO as the advisor for a little while. She's going to also sit on the board. This, I think, looks like a home run for Victoria's Secret.
It certainly does. This is just a great, apparently, acquisition for VSCO, somebody who's really known this intimate knows it intimately, I guess I should say, Pete. And Savage Fenty, I'm not kidding around. I mean, Rihanna's a billionaire for a reason, Pete. She has created a fantastic brand for herself. She sang at the Super Bowl. Yeah. And, I think that this might be one of the best acquisitions of CEO talent that they could have made. All right, let's take a look at Brinker International, Pete. We had unusual activity in it not too long ago. The stock popped. We said, hey, if you're somebody who's lucky enough to be in a stock when it makes that significant pop, you got to take half the money off the table. If you did and held on to the other half, yeah, you wish you took the whole thing off. Why? Because they missed on top line and bottom line here, Pete. Costs have gone up. We've talked about it for fast food. We've talked about it for fast casual. We've talked about it for restaurants. From employees to the inputs that go into what they put on your plate, the costs have gone up. That makes it a lot tougher on all these companies to report spectacular earnings in this sector. And these guys missed pretty badly. The stock trading down. And if you had options instead of stock, well, you took enough off the table, hopefully on that pop, that you didn't get hurt.
I got to tell you, John, I look at these earnings from Brinker, and yes, they missed. But I think the interesting thing for me always is to look back and say, okay, but what did they look like year over year? That number is actually pretty impressive. Year over year, $1.61 versus $1.39. That's a pretty nice move. I like what they did there. PE is trading at an 18. This is a stock that had been up 62% year to date. They've done a really spectacular job. By the way, the S&P is up, 14% or something? So this is on a big run. Now it's up about 43%. It did hit 58 right out of the gate. It never looked at it again, started moving back to the upside. Last I looked, it was trading somewhere closer maybe to 62 or somewhere in that range, John. This is one I'd keep a close eye on because they've got some shorts. I'm not saying the earnings were great because they missed what everybody expected. But nonetheless, I think when you look at that year over year, that's important too. And that shows me that they continue to kick butt. They basically have beat 3 out of every 4 quarters on the earnings. So this is a company that they just seem to keep rolling. This quarter, that number did miss the anticipated numbers, but nonetheless, they're still doing very, very well.
Yeah, and Chili's and Maggiano's, those are a couple of their big brands, folks. They run a tight ship. So this is not like, they missed by 30 or 40 cents or anything like that. Missed by, I think, 4 cents. And like I say, this is tough slogging here for the restaurants. Doesn't matter if you're fast or fast casual or, a fancy sit-down place, which neither of those really are. Maggiano's is great, and the food is great. Same thing with Chili's, but they're more or less in that fast casual kind of idea. Yeah. All right, Pete, we got to give a shout out to a big fan of yours and mine, young Max here. Here he is at the Nationals. Max is a swimmer, and Max is there with that young lady. That's a young lady who's got several Olympic medals around her neck, and another one this year, Katie Ledecky. Man, what a great swimmer. And Max, let's show that swim cap of his. There you go. So you get that. If you're a junior and you go to Nationals, you get that. And so, Max, congratulations there, big guy. That's fabulous. Love to see it. And, it's a great tie into the Olympics because Ledecky, this was probably her last, Pete. But Max, just getting started with a bang going to the Nationals this year. Yeah. Nicely done, Max.
That's killer. That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. All right, John, let's just jump into the sports. I got something to just run by you. So I was looking at the NFL today, and I everywhere I looked, all the conversations were some about free agency, what receivers should be getting paid. Some of them are sitting out. You've got the Brandon Ayuk thing going on. You've got others. You've got Cincinnati. You've got a lot of different teams where you've got some guys out there that think they should be paid. Dallas Cowboys have got multiple people. But what I wanted to focus on a little bit, John, is what is it about these injuries? Last year we had some, this year we've had some, and I think this year it's even far worse because everywhere I look, and that was something that stood out to me when I was on some of the different sports spots that I go to, ESPN being one of them, it's a highlight of injuries. The whole thing is like an injury report. Everything about it is like a mass unit. I mean, including the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, we've got J.J. McCarthy. He was looking great. He did a fantastic job. He had 2 touchdowns and interception the other day, bounced back. He looked fantastic. Now he's got to have a knee surgery. They don't know how long he'll be out, but the odds are that he's out at least 6 or 8 weeks, probably, and maybe even the season. So what is going on, John? I mean, I look around, I see Nick Chubb, Odell Beckham, Chase Claypool, TJ Hawkinson, tight end for the Vikings, JJ McCarthy, quarterback for the Vikings, Bradley Chubb. I mean, everywhere I look, Eric Armstead, Miami, all of these guys are hurt. A lot of big names. Now, I guess what I'm questioning is, and a lot of people, and I don't want to turn this into a political thing, but something is causing this to happen more. And I don't know what it is, because these guys have powerful folks that work them out, a lot of different ways of eating. A lot of these guys have absolutely their own chef that takes care of them just so they can be at the top level of whatever it is that they are doing for a defensive line, O-line, running back, quarterback. Somebody needs to lose weight. Somebody needs to gain weight, more muscle, all of that. But what do you think about this, John? Is this maybe a little bit to do with the vaccine, possibly? And I'm not just trying to float that out there as something, but it is something that makes you wonder a little bit, because last year we had all those Achilles injuries as well and others, but it just makes you wonder. I don't know that I've seen the injury report this time of year this long. And I took a look at it, John. It was multiple pages of length of how many guys are right now on the injury report.
Yeah, well, and it could be, Pete, that even though these athletes are super elite, they are right on the edge. So it could be any of those inputs. Could it have been something with the vaccine? I suppose. Could it be that they're just so highly tuned? I mean, for those of us who like sports cars, you know that Ferrari or Lamborghini or whatever supercar, you know, that you might want, a McLaren, whatever, they're not everyday drivers, folks. You compare that thing to an F-150 like Pete's driving around in, he never has to bring that thing into the shop, ever. Maybe you change the oil. Same thing with my Jeeps down here in Puerto Rico, Pete. You just change the oil and everything's cool. But you get a sports car, they're much more high strung. And I'd say these athletes who have pushed themselves through the drills they do combine and so forth, Pete, like JJ McCarthy, like every athlete that was at the combine, they pushed themselves to be just that much faster in that 40-yard dash, to be just that much stronger in that bench press or in the high jump, the vertical jump or horizontal jump or any of those things. And I think when you're on the edge that far, it doesn't take much more than a tweak for all of a sudden that to become a meniscus, which is what J.J. McCarthy has, a meniscus tear, maybe not all the way through, we hope not. But also, Pete, I don't think they can put him on injured reserve. They'll do that operation right away and figure it out, but they can't put him on injured reserve and take him off before training camp. They'd have to leave him on and then put him on injured reserve after, because too many teams, as Pete knows, used to play games with that so that you could basically put a guy on injured reserve and then pull him off at 4th week of the season. And it was basically a way to play games with the roster. You can't do that anymore. You put him on injured reserve during training camp, he's gone for the season. And hopefully when they open up JJ, Pete, he doesn't need to have the surgery that would indeed keep him out for the season. But, with the numbers the way they are this year, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't take any snaps in games this year.
Yeah, and the disappointment for any Viking fans out there is, we didn't expect being here in Minnesota that they're going to the Super Bowl, but JJ McCarthy gave you a lot of reasons why it might be pretty interesting with the receiver core that they've got, the tight ends that they've got, nice offensive line, a new running back, and Aaron Jones from Green Bay coming over here to the Minnesota. There's a lot of reasons people were pretty excited, but I wouldn't say that there was Super Bowl aspirations, because they might have aspirations, but they weren't a Super Bowl team. Anyway, next up, you know who else out there is an investor in a big way and had aspirations for a Super Bowl and got it pretty quick? Jerry Jones, John.
Yep.
This guy's a absolute phenomenal owner who defied all of the different folks out there that were pushing against him when he paid, was it 110 or 140 million? It really doesn't really matter, John. But when he bought the Dallas Cowboys, it was somewhere within that range, and it doesn't matter. Call it 150 million, whatever. Doesn't matter at all. Sportico came out today and said, you know what? The most expensive team in the entire NFL, the Dallas Cowboys. How about them Cowboys? I mean, $10.32 billion is the value presently for a guy who was considered an idiot by so many people back in 1992, 93, whenever it was. 96 is the last time, however, I think they won the Super Bowl. So he's got to be frustrated about the Super Bowl issues and all the rest of it, but he's got a great quarterback, got to sign him. Great receiver, still got to sign him. Unbelievable defensive end / linebacker, got to sign him. I wouldn't be surprised, John, if he just says the hell with it and goes over the cap and just says, you know what, find me or whatever. I mean, something might happen there. I don't know. But here's the next ones. The Rams are $7.8 billion. The Giants, $7.65 billion. Pats, 7.3. 49ers, 6.86. The entirety of the NFL now, $190 billion is the value of the NFL teams at this point in time. I mean, this is absolutely amazing. And is there a name that maybe would surprise you, John, that's not in that top five? Because there's probably somebody. I think I can think of a couple that I thought might be in there themselves, and I'm a little bit shocked that maybe they're not. How about you?
Yeah, well, and, Kansas City sells out every game, Pete, has for years, plural. But and they want the new stadium. They want the super boxes, not just a regular box. They want the super boxes that they can sell to the corporates and all that stuff. But your point about Jerry Jones, it's not a 10X for Jerry Jones. It's 100X. 100X what he paid for that team, because 10X would be, a billion and a half, Pete. If you paid 150 mil, $1.5 billion. He's 100X. That's an amazing number. I think the fact that those Cowboys fans continue to support them the way they have, the fact that they haven't won it in 28 years. How about them Cowboys?
Well,
yeah.
And the other thing, John, the other thing I'd add to that, John, is that we were fortunate enough. Jerry was so nice. As soon as AT&T Stadium was built and all the rest of it, you and I had an opportunity to go down there, sit in the owner's booth, sat there right behind Billionaires Row, because we weren't quite at that level. but Mark Cuban and several others that were sitting up there, I guess the Walmart family and a few others were there. So the Billionaires Row was standing tall, I can tell you that. But now it's Jerry Jones standing even taller.
Yeah, I mean, what an unbelievable purchase. And he continues to put a great product on the field, even though they haven't won it, like we said. But he does put a great product on the field. It's one of the biggest brands in sports. And that's with, Arsenal and Man United and all that. This is the most expensive franchise in sports, folks. Period, full stop, end of story. $10.3 billion for the Dallas Cowboys. It's pretty special, that kind of return in that period of time. All right. Thanks for joining us, folks. Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'd encourage you to check out, of course, our book, It's Not an Option, because it's not an option to trade just stocks anymore. If you needed a better example than Victoria's Secret or NVIDIA or Kellanova, any of those, well, get that book. It'll show you how we do it and how we trade and how Pete and I have traded for a combined 75 years in these derivatives. It's a great way to trade, folks. Define your risk on entry, get a leveraged return. Fabulous way. Bang. Have a good one. See you tomorrow.